there's just nothing better. There's not a better piece of meat on a cow than properly cooked short ribs.
Yeah. In charcuterie making or curing meat, the magic number is 30% fat. If you get a piece of meat, a ribeye is roughly 30% fat, like the eye, the cap, like that's where like a capicola is the neck muscle of the pig. And that's the one perfect cut out of a pig that is exactly 30% fat. The ribeye, the short rib on a perfectly raised, not over fattened cow is 30% fat. It's interesting. It's made for making the perfect lean to moisture ratio. You're absolutely right. It is the greatest.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you too.
What's new in your world?
What is new in my world? Man, it stopped raining. That's huge for us.
That's nice.
One hell of a wet spring, unbelievably wet. So it feels like I got a new lease in life right now because the garden's growing and people are showing up to work.
How's all that rain for the yard grapes?
God, nightmare. Everything's like 3 weeks behind.
Okay.
Which is problematic for me because, Jess and I have this relationship where I hunt a lot in September, as you know, and she makes wine in September. And then it really folds over to where I have to help her in October. And then I go with John to go hunt deer in November. So if it lands in November, we're going to have that hard relationship conversation of, am I going to stick around and make wine or be able to go hunting? But she's the greatest, and she's going to obviously let me go hunting.
Well, folks, we're here with my very good friend Elias Cairo from Olympia Provisions. Dude, you've got such an interesting story, and you've seen success with meat in one of the most creative ways of anyone I know. Yeah, the most. It's super cool. You've done a tremendous thing, but I kind of want to start at the beginning. So when did you get the idea to go to that school in, was it Switzerland, Germany?
Switzerland, yeah.
Switzerland.
Yeah, that's interesting. So at around 16 years old, I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I was lucky enough to get sponsored for snowboarding.
Yeah.
And I dropped out of high school to pursue my snowboarding passions. More so, like I was able to go to alternative high school in Utah, but during the winter time. So spent my time snowboarding, and my father and mother owned restaurants in Salt Lake City. So I spent my entire life in restaurants growing up in them, helping my dad cook and all of those things. I got pretty scared snowboarding and realized that this isn't for me. I'm not the adrenaline junkie that I'm surrounded by. It's like inside of a nice warm kitchen, making people happy with food was more my style. So I called my mom, and I'm like, this isn't.
What scared you?
I was in Big Sky, Montana, tell it very clearly. And it was that flat, light, foggy day. And I was sitting up there with a bunch of other people and a bunch of amazing snowboarders. And they were all super, super duper excited to go jump off a cliff that they couldn't see the landing. And I was like, I can do this. That's totally fine. And I'm like, God, do I have to do this? Like, it's kind of my job. I guess I gotta do this. And flew off of it halfway down, hit rocks, tumbled, a couple times, puked, goggles flew everywhere, yard sale, so on and so forth. Shook it off, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I can do this for the rest of my life, because that wasn't the most fun I've ever had. So instantly knew it was kind of not for me. And then the next day, new resort, stand up and try something scary again.
Yeah.
So it wasn't for me. So I called my mom, and I was like, hey, Mom, I don't think this is for me. I'm going to become a fancy chef. I'm going to be like Dad. I'm going to open up restaurants, so on and so forth. And we're Greek. And she's like, if you're going to become a chef, we're going to ship you back to Greece, and you're going to become a fancy Greek chef. And I'm like, Mom, I know how to cook goats over a fire. I can make enough spanakopita to feed all of America. I want to be a fancy chef. I want to go to France. And so she's like, oh, okay. Reaches around, calls to the church. Long story short, out of nowhere, somebody calls me from Switzerland and is like, hey, we had an apprentice hurt themselves. If you could be here in 2 weeks, you can get a job. And I sold everything, sold all my snowboarding stuff, sold everything, and went to the library. This is pre-internet times for me anyways. Went to the encyclopedia and looked up Unterwasser, Switzerland, said ski resort town famous for curing meat and making cheese. Sold.
Sounds amazing.
Doesn't it? It's like perfect. That was kind of it. And then got on an airplane, got on a train, ended up in the middle of this little village up in the Swiss Alps, and the rest kind of played itself out. It's a pretty fascinating story. That one of the things I think you'll relate with the most, on the first day I reported to work, I walked into the kitchen and into the walk-in and pushed open the walk-in, and there was an ibex hanging in the walk-in, full fur and horns, top to bottom, standing in there. And I was like, what? Trying to find somebody that could speak enough English for me to be like, why is this amazing thing here? And then it slowly explained that they utilize them.
Yeah, and that's a Steinbuck in Switzerland, I think.
Yeah.
And there's a few things that you can hunt on the regular, but that would be something that only occurred, maybe once or twice in somebody's lifetime of hunting there, as I understand it.
Correct. Yeah. Very, very rare to be able to hunt ibex, for sure.
Yeah. What was that school like? It sounds pretty rigid, pretty hard.
Yeah, it was. So I was only supposed to be there initially 6 months. Like, I was going to go there and just be an apprentice and help out and see if the fit was good. As soon as I landed and saw that there was a wild game processor, a meat processor, full bakery, fancy restaurant, and I could ski in and out of my place I was staying, I was like, you're never getting rid of me. So I wasn't initially there to go to school. I was just to be a laborer and learn how to cook. I begged to stay. I did everything I could to make everybody in the village and my bosses love me. My neighbors were cheesemakers and ran a dairy, so I would go over there and flip hay and rotate cheeses and whatever I could. And we got our meat from the valley, so if they were killing animals in the valley, I'd go down there and clean up after the kill on my days off. I just did everything I could to make them, know that I could work and was willing to work, study the language like crazy, and finally begged to go to school. And the apprenticeship, the actual kitchen itself, it's a different way to learn how to cook. You go to work every day at 7:00. You work up until around after the lunch rush, so 1:30. Then you get 3 hours off, and then you work until about 10 at night. And that just repeats itself 6 days a week. So you're hands-on with a little 3-hour break in the middle of the day. Thank goodness it was in the middle of nature and skiing and rock climbing in the summertime. So I was able to get out every day and enjoy it. Insanely precise, very high stress. Everything had to be perfect. Yelling, slapping, getting kicked, getting bullied. All of the things that go around when you picture a classic European kitchen are very, very true. But it was at the right time in my life. I knew I didn't have a whole lot else going on for me. And I loved it. I loved the idea of learning the language, learning the culture, learning how to cook at such a high level, and learning how to butcher and cure meat at that level. So all the punishment was way worth it.
And how did all of that lead to Olympia Provisions?
So after my apprenticeship, I moved to Greece quickly to run a restaurant on an island, but my whole goal was to move back to Switzerland and air cure beef over natural mountain air. So they kill their beef in like a vintage every winter. They kill them in December, and they salt them and they dry them with mountain air with slatted windows and a river that runs underneath this curing facility for humidity. And I'm like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
My sister called me. She had moved to Portland, Oregon from Salt Lake City. I was like, Eli, you've really got to come check this place out. Portland is an amazing place for food. Like, everybody's making wine. There's unbelievable beer. There's coffee. I gave her the eye roll. I was like, yeah, I'm in Switzerland. Come on. Flew into Portland, went downtown to the Portland Farmers Market and tried Rogue River blue cheese. I don't know if you're familiar with that cheese, but it's one of the best freaking blue cheeses in the world. And they were selling out like crazy. I'm like, who are these people buying this crazy blue musky molded cheese? And then the next thing's these amazing lettuces, and everybody's so particular about their wine and beer and the coffee. And I said to Michelle, hey, let's get some salami for our picnic that we're going to have. She's like, I don't know if anybody makes salami. I was like, what do you mean? No, there's this many people and nobody makes salami. I was like, well, let's get some pate. And there's somebody's got to cure meat here. And there just wasn't, it just didn't exist. And then I went to a grocery store here and I bought some American made salami. And I just kept, like, the whole week was just me telling Michelle, like, this isn't cured meats. This isn't my version of what I've just learned for the last 5 years. There's a way to make these completely different than what is offered here. And so I told then my fiance, my ex-wife now, that I'm not going to live in Liechtenstein, that we're going to move to this town called Portland, Oregon, and let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. And off you went. So the business is called Olympia Provisions now. It started out as Olympic Provisions. Obviously a nod to your Greek heritage there. And a big shout out to the folks at the Olympic Committee for being a bunch of assholes and being so threatened by your sausage business that they made you change your name. Bunch of heroes.
A bunch of heroes. So it was in the Olympic Mills building. I clung onto it because of my Greek heritage, but that's why I took the name. I was going to provide salami for the Olympic Mills. Didn't think anything about the Olympics. So once they said I had to change my name, we think we're funny. We think we're really funny. So once we got the letter, we hand wrote the Olympic Committee a letter saying, hey, thank you, Olympics, for showing interest in my small independent meat company in Portland, Oregon. I've noticed that your athletes look pretty protein deficient. I am willing to give your athletes a stick of salami and I'll keep the name. Thank you, Olympic Provisions. And they responded back with the driest letter ever, being like, we need to talk to your lawyers. Different level of humor over there in the Olympics. Pretty funny.
Well, they're that's another thing. But Olympia Provisions rolled on. What do you make now?
So I make 2009. It started out. This is a good fact for you, James.
Yeah,
we were the first USDA plant in the history of the state of Oregon to be able to ferment meat naturally, cover it in mold, and sell it over state lines. So that's what I started up doing, just being the first salami maker in Oregon. That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Was just ferment salami. Then that kind of caught on. So we made hot dogs, patés. Now we do bacons, hams. If you can make it out of pork, except prosciutto and dry cured meats, I make it. And now I even make pet treats out of all my byproducts from the pigs I buy. So I have as little waste as humanly possible.
Yeah. And that's very true. I've been fortunate enough to tour your facility a couple of times, and the amount of equipment that you have to ensure that you're not wasting anything, and the meticulous care for that equipment and for the space, like everything looks like it's brand new all the time. Like I would literally feel comfortable eating off that floor on any day of the week. It's amazing what you've done to keep that place perfectly sanitary in an unconventional way, because you also have rooms that are completely full of molding meat, and that freaks people out. They don't know that that's okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. The USDA included when we started. Didn't know that was okay. Yeah, that a lot of that I definitely learned in Switzerland. The cleanliness, the organization, the upkeep of the rooms. It takes hard work and setting that tone to make sure it's all operating squeaky clean. And the USDA doesn't hurt. You have to show up every day. They inspect my facility daily. They pre-op it multiple times a week. And so it all helps I love a perfectly clean, organized place. The whole world in Portland could be going absolutely crazy, but you step inside of that meat plant and that's the place where it is absolutely organized, clean, and everything's where you expect it to be. And that's just the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I would lay on one of those tables for a surgery and feel confident in it,
Yeah, we use ProQuat. We're ready to go. We should be surgery sanitized for sure.
Okay, so fermenting meat. Typically, when we think of fermentation, we think of beer, some type of alcohol process, maybe something like sauerkraut or kimchi or whatever. We don't typically think of fermenting meat. So what does that even mean?
So fermenting, all of those that you named go through essentially the same process of using a lactic acid of some sort. Beer, of course, produces ethanol, so it's a little different, but of course you can use a lactic acid to get different types of beers. You're using a lactic culture to consume a starch of some sort. 90% of the time it's dextrose, so a mono sugar, a very simple convertible sugar, and it releases a byproduct. Most of the time it's lactic acid. So when you're fermenting meat, you've inoculated it with a culture that's consuming dextrose and releasing lactic acid, dropping the pH. Okay. So we use what we call a degree chart. So you hold meat directly in the danger zone or the prescribed danger zone, 80 degrees, 100% humidity, and you have a clock that starts ticking. The second you get into that danger zone, you have to race with the good pH, the good pathogens to outrace any bad pathogens. So you need that pH to drop quicker than, let's choose one, Listeria, Staphylococcus, any of those fun ones. Before they have a chance to expand, your pH has to drop to a level that they're not going to flourish or expand.
Okay.
Did that make sense? I kind of got lost. Yeah. Is that good?
No, I get it. So you're trying to get a specific type of mold to grow and outcompete any bad ones, and by changing the environment that mold can function in.
Correct. So the first step is just internally in the meat. That's just the lactic acid. That's a culture inside consuming, dropping it. And then the mold's the next step. The penicillium mold is the most fascinating step right after it. So in this, once you've got the pH to drop, then the salt that's in there is bringing the sour moisture out of the meat. And in that meat, there's a small amount of yeasts on it. And that lands on the outside of the casing. And that's when penicillium, or better known as penicillin, is how most people know it as. That's when it catches on. And that mold blooms on the outside of those salamis and attacks any other kind of bad bacteria on the outside of it and allows the mold to bloom, and plays a huge point in flavor, making sure there's no bacteria on the outside, but it also keeps the outside of the salami moist enough to dry natural with air that's flowing over the outside of it.
And this isn't a new concept. Curing meat like this isn't like something that Eli came up with in Switzerland in the early 2000s. It's been around for a minute. So last year I took a quarter of a white-tailed buck that I shot like August or October 1st, 2nd, somewhere in there. Took the whole hind quarter. I put like a pound of, Morton's kosher salt on it, rubbed it in, hung it in a game bag. 10 days later, I took it out of the game bag, knocked the salt off, back in the game bag, and I hung it up in just the breezeway between my shop and my woodshed. And I didn't crack into that thing again until April. And it was completely white, hard on the outside. It lost a ton of weight. And I cut into it and it was still moist and red, and I ate some and it was freaking incredible. It tasted super, super good. And it was mild and melted in my mouth. It was amazing. I posted a video of it, and I took a ton of heat from people across the internet who are, of course, experts, some of them legitimately, some not. And they're like, how dare you? It's like, I'm pretty sure that this has been around since before refrigerators by a minute.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Obviously that's not an ideal environment like what you provide. But it worked. Like I was able to take nothing but meat and salt and air and preserve calories, preserve meat. Amazing.
Yeah. That's where it all started is, before refrigeration, we would kill and hunt animals and we had to figure out how to preserve it. And the easiest way was, we're talking pre-fire, is they realized dipping it in salt would start pulling the moisture out of it. And it's kind of as we were talking, when you're using salt as opposed to a fermentation step like you did a dry cured meat, you're racing the moisture inside of the meat to keep it from spoiling. So once you put it in that salt, it's clicking. It's going to pull out a lot of salt. Most people leave it under refrigeration degrees, and that's kind of a variable. So if you're at 60 degrees and it's salted and you're out for like a week, you're going to pull out a lot of moisture. In an ideal situation, it's under 44 degrees with 2.5 or 4.5% salt. That's going to pull all the moisture out of it. And exactly like you saw, once you took it out and the salts pulled it out, it formed that yeast on the outside from the meat and the liquid, the suspended liquid inside. And that attracted that beautiful penicillin mold that's all over the world. And that also protected and attacked any bad bacteria. That's how we cured meats forever.
Yeah.
The most fascinating thing about it is once did it preserve the color I remember seeing it was like bright red and bright pink. It looked really good. It didn't have any black discolorations or anything, right?
Yeah, no, there's no black in it at all.
And that's a very interesting thing, because nitrate plays it's a shunned word in America, but it's such an amazing part of the curing meat. And depending on what salt you used, it could contain a natural percentage of nitrate in it. And so back in the days when we first started curing meat really, really well, they would find these salt sources that had a natural amount of nitrate in it. For example, fog on places where they have a lot of sea salts. Fog contains those areas that the sea salt is catching sun and they're drying it with the sun. If fog goes over the top of that, they track a lot of nitrate in that salt naturally. And so they'll put the nitrated sea salt, saying it's pure sea salt, and the nitrate preserves the color of the meat. And then, of course, addresses botulism, which is very rare in dry cured meats, but more common in salamis and sausages.
Interesting. Okay, so you're also a hunter. You spend, as you mentioned, a couple months out of your year hunting as much as you can. You're going out after upland birds a lot. You're going after deer. You're going after elk, and you're successful at it. When you are bringing home an elk, for example, are you thinking about ways that you can do something more interesting with that meat than just steaks, roast, and burger, or are you so over, all your cured stuff at work that you're like, whatever, just, do what's easy?
No. Yeah, no, I would say the most, there's so much that I love about hunting that I could just pick your brain and ask you about it. But I've spent my entire life since I've been a teenager, making people happy through food, right? Like, the way things taste. And at some point you get kind of bored of beef, pork, lamb, old cows, young pigs, you name it. And every time I shoot a new animal or I'm lucky enough to eat one of them, I'm back to a kid in a candy shop. They all cook different. There's all sorts of different things that I like to see how it changes from another animal to another animal, or how it tastes, and how not to waste anything. That's part of I learned in Switzerland, is how much can you utilize off of this animal to make unbelievable treats and snacks, be it jerky sticks or summer sausage, to rillettes, to confits, to pâtés, to how does the heart and liver taste in a pâté, and so on and so forth. So yeah, long story short, it gets me more excited than anything to start playing with new meats and older elk or younger elk or cows and so on and so forth.
So are you trying to make salamis with them?
Of course, I've made salamis. I don't do a ton of salami production because I'm really, really picky about it.
Okay.
And I don't want to ruin it. And in my USDA plant, I can't ferment it and hang it next to my salami that's being distributed across America. And as much as Jess loves me, if I built another curing chamber in our house, I think that might be the the final drop. Come home and she has more ammonia smelling elk in the basement. I think it might be too much. But
so if somebody were to build a room for curing, or convert an old refrigerator or something like that, how would they go about it? What do they need?
Super simple. You need around 58 degrees. So you gotta trick it out to operate and not freeze up at a certain temperature. You can do it with fans. You need humidity, and then you need a small way to rotate that air. So you have to have like a muffin fan in there, something that controls temperature. You could a plug in, plug out thermometer. Think you can set it. You can plug them into the wall, say it's 58, have a thermometer, and it'll turn your refrigerator off when it hits that temperature. Then a humidistat and a humidifier in there. Okay. And you're off to the races, and clean it real well, and start enjoying.
It's 58 degrees. What's special about that temperature?
That's a great question. And again, that's what, in my humidity, that's where it blooms. Okay. So that's where 58 degrees is a very comfortable. The molds seem to do well between the 55 and 62. It's like that's where the molds really act, and they bloom well and they blossom. If they go underneath that temperature, they're really, really slow. The skin on the outside of the casing can dry. You get case hardening, so on and so forth. And over that, they'll start to grease out. The sausage itself will start getting a little bit too much fat on the outside of it, and the molds won't bloom on the outside of it. Just kind of in that window of 58 degrees. From a safety perspective, if you're going to make salami, the one key step that I would say, please use nitrate, be safe on that step, and then a pH meter or a way to chart that your fermentation actually happened is the two things that I would say is this. Once you get it to drop, you're completely fine. If the pH drops, you're not going to get sick, and if there's nitrate in there, you're not going to get sick.
Is that an expensive device?
No, not anymore. It's relative. You can use pH strips. People do that. Like the things the paper
litmus test.
Thank you very much. Litmus test. That you can use those. You can make a slurry and like blend it or whatever and use that in your salami sample, and they do work relatively good. And then pH Hansen, or HR Hansen is the name of the company, and they sell like mobile ones. And for a home person, I think you're out of there for like $75, and you'll have it for the rest of your life. Just keep your filament moist, and you'll be good to go.
Perfect. What does smoke do that also aids in curing?
Yeah, long story short is it just does not allow the outside of the sausage to have bacteria grow on it. We noticed way back in the day when people didn't want mold or spoilage bacteria on the outside of their smoke or of their meats, they would run it over smoke, and it would slowly but surely change the chemistry on the outside where bacteria can no longer form on it. And long story short, we started craving that. With all of these molds and the smoke, they're thousands of years old now, and our bodies have slowly but surely learned to love them and crave them and associate them with meats. And selective as well. With the molds, for example, the way we got to blue cheese molds, or the way we got to the molds in which I use Petticoat and Anglovese, is so much selectiveness. One of my favorite stories is why they chose these molds was partially because when you walk into my dry box, James, the first thing you realize, I'm sure you smelled this, is that ammonia smell. Yeah. And it releases, it's kind of almost pungent. It really affects people if you have any kind of allergies or hay fevers. It really can choke you up in a hurry. And initially, when those molds bloomed, they didn't have a lot of ways to keep insects out of their farms or where they were curing them in their caves, but they realized that this mold released enough ammonia that the flies would not land on the outside of the salamis and plant its eggs, and there wouldn't be maggots inside of it. So they started leaning towards these really pungent ammonia-producing molds on the outside of them. Kept using these, kept appropriating them until these were the molds that turned out the best, and that's part of the flavor and also part of the safety steps.
Interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is fascinating.
Have you heard the Roquefort one by chance? The Penicillium Roquefort, the blue cheese one?
Tell me more.
It's so the story is when the Romans conquered the town of Roquefort, they were I think they grew rye. The wheat that they made their bread out of was rye, or one of those breads, and they would make these rye loaves. And when the Romans came, they hid all their cheese and all their breads up in this cave. Once they rolled through, they smuggled up there. It was way too long. They opened the door, and the rye formed this crazy blue mold on the outside of it that eventually started feeding off of the cheese that they were drying. They were starving, of course, and they bit into it, and they were like, "Whoa, this funky cheese tastes kind of amazing. What happens if we take this blue mold and fold it into our cheese, or our rye crust that is molded, fold it into our cheese, and it turns into a blue cheese that we've learned to love?" Now, from here on out, I'm pretty sure Roquefort is still protected by AOC, so the laws in Europe that you have to make this way, that if you get your mold spore for that blue cheese, it has to come from a loaf of bread.
That's amazing.
Isn't that so fascinating?
To think of mold as something that we would have to like build regulations around so that we can preserve it and make sure that it stays the same.
Yes, I love that stuff. Yeah, Iberico, for example, my favorite piece of cured meat in the entire world. The pigs, the black Iberico hams from Spain on the Iberico Peninsula. They spend their entire lives, everything they do, eat, how they're born, how they're raised, what they can consume during what type of years, is all protected. To be a true Iberico, they form a very beautiful black mold on the outside of them through a big part of their life. And to get the highest rating on the outside, they know this black mold comes from the ocean waters that are around there. And on the outside of it, it forms a black mold. Very unique to that. Like Parma, the prosciuttos, same process, no mold makes it a Parma prosciutto. This black Iberico mold is what makes Iberico such a special flavor as well.
And those hogs graze on nuts quite a bit, right? Chestnuts. Yeah. I killed a pig in South Carolina one time on a hunt that we did with dogs, and it was full of acorns, and that's the best pork I've ever had.
Sorry, acorns are what these pigs eat. I said chestnuts. Okay. Acorns underneath oaks. Yes.
So incredible. Incredible.
The best. Yeah. Nut finished animals, if they're lucky enough to feed them, is such an amazing thing. That's a big part of. Have you ever tried my salami saucisson de Arles, James? The one is just sea salt, where I just ferment it and just have. That's the one that I think is so fascinating. If people have the time or the palate to like enjoy it, because it changes throughout the year wherever I'm getting my pigs, or if I ever get a specific pig and I just ferment it and give it the salt, whatever it's been consuming throughout that year, you taste it instantly. Yeah. So if you buy that product in January through February when they're feeding their pigs corn rations, it tastes just like a Frito. You would never notice it. You'd be like, wow, this is a Frito. And then you're like, it's a very expensive pork patty Frito. And then I've been lucky enough to have farmers that have, access to peach orchards or cherry orchards, and running the pigs over them. It'll change the texture of the fat, but the flavor is completely different. It's really fascinating.
So your cookbook goes into pretty easy to understand detail about how to make all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so happy that you find it easy. That makes me so happy.
Oh yeah, because I'm not a chef. I'm barely even a cook. Like to make sure that I have enough food for like myself and people around me. So for me to be able to follow that stuff and be able to do it on simple products like on a Traeger grill or even on like your, the pit grill that you have in your backyard, whatever, like you can do it. It's not that hard.
Yeah. And that was a big goal for me. Is everybody instantly asked me how to make a prosciutto or a salami. And that's like learning how to ski on a black diamond. Yeah. There's so many easier places to start your learning how to cure meat. Just like you were saying, if you can roast a beef or make roast beef sandwich, that is charcuterie. And that's the same thing as making a capicola or smoking a bacon. You're just adding salt at a certain ratio and then slowly roasting it and smoking it and creating one of the best products ever. And so I started it that way in the book. Start super simple. Don't need a lot of machinery. Don't need a grinder. Don't need anything. You need a knife and an oven, and slowly but surely kind of take you through it up to fermenting and dry curing.
Okay, well let's give the people a sample. You head down to Costco, you buy yourself a pork belly, cut it into thirds, you crack open the book because you're gonna make your own bacon. All right.
Yep.
You're an American and you're gonna make some freaking bacon because bacon is our gift.
And we are free.
Yes. How do we do it?
It's really, 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 really awesome. You follow the ratio in the book. So it's 2.4% salt, a little bit of Instacure pink salt in there, and a little bit of sugar. You coat the outside of it. You put it inside of a Ziploc bag, put it in your refrigerator for 5 days. Then you're going to do the hard part. You're going to flip it over in the bag. You're going to put it back in the refrigerator, make sure the salt got distributed kind of nicely. On the 10th day, you're going to take that out and you're going to rinse it. At that time, you're going to choose your cooking apparatus of your choice. I've done it on anything from a Weber to, of course, a Traeger. By the way, Traeger, if they've done anything, is talk about making smoking meat look easy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it is, it's so awesome that I can roll it to my father-in-law's house now, and I've been smoking meat a whole nother level, and he can outsmoke a chicken by me on his Traeger. Like, no problem. What's going on here? So, essentially, the goal is that you got to get the amount of smoke that you want on it. So if you're using a Weber, you start a small charcoal fire, you get the wood type that you like, be it apple or a hardwood, whatever it is, and you get it to produce smoke. So a low simmery kind of smoke, and that take an hour maybe, depending on where you're at, a couple hours. Just keep smoking it, and then pull the bacon off and smell it. As soon as it starts smelling like the level of you're like, ooh, that smells like where I like my bacon to smell like smoke. Some people love it to smell super smoky. Some people like it to be a hint. And then the next goal you have to do is get it over 144 degrees. So you can either crank up your grill, crank up your Weber, or take it off and put it in your oven. And then once that gets to 144, pull it off, put it in your refrigerator, and then you're the hero of the breakfast table, and your family is going to want you to do it every day.
And it's not that tough. It's just not like it's so simple. I mean, it's literally like a couple minutes of work on the front end and then some really light smoking on the back end. And dude, it's so incredible. So incredible.
Baking a cake is way harder.
Way harder.
Way. You have to measure so many things.
Dude, I get frustrated with baking because people talk about how, you just follow the directions. Exactly. Follow these directions. Exactly. I can do that. I can read step, do step like a champion. But then I come across things and it's like, okay, you need to use, a quarter of a teaspoon for this. I'm like, okay, that's a very precise amount. And then it says 2 eggs. They don't know how big these eggs are. Yeah. Right. I can't handle that kind of stuff. Yeah. It drives me crazy. I have to look for like what I think is the most average sized egg I struggle with baking, but making bacon on the other hand, I do not struggle with. I crush it. I also use your recipe on pork spare ribs, and I made bacon spare ribs. And
awesome.
Dude, talk about crushing it at Christmas. Like people couldn't get enough of that. It was bacon on a stick. Yeah.
I mean, bone in bacon. So with the entire spare rib on the bottom of the belly and slicing it like with the entire baby back on, or I guess you would call it the short rib on top of it. Oh my God, it is the greatest thing ever. And it's another trick about the bacon thing is, God, even bad bacon is so good. It still renders, it still crisps up, it's still salty, it's still just so delicious. Yeah.
I made beef short ribs this week with your short rib recipe.
Oh, from the book?
Yeah. Took 3 days to do it. And I think that's just one of the best pieces of beef you can possibly have.
Oh my God. So nice.
And as like a ride or die ribeye dude, it hurts me a little bit to say that. But if you just keep following that rib bone south a little ways, you're right under the ribeye and you're on the middle of the ribs, basically that's where short ribs are cut from. And if you do that right, there's just nothing better. There's not a better piece of meat on a cow than properly cooked short ribs.
Yeah. In charcuterie making or curing meat, the magic number is 30% fat. If you get a piece of meat, a ribeye is roughly 30% fat, like the
Gotcha.
eye, the cap, like that's where you're like a capicola is the neck muscle of the pig. And that's the one perfect cut out of a pig that is exactly 30% fat. The ribeye, the short rib on a perfectly raised, not over fattened cow is 30% fat.
Interesting.
It's made for making the perfect lean to moisture ratio. You're absolutely right. It is the greatest. Yeah. And have you tried to make bear bacon? This is something I haven't done, and it's 90% of the reason I try to hunt bear is I just have to make a bear bacon.
Okay. Well, you should come out and shoot a bear with me then.
Yeah, I would love that. That was my non-direct, indirect invite.
And then you can do it. Like, let me know how it goes. I've got a real serious love-hate relationship with bear meat because I've made it wonderful and I've made it inedible. And it kills me to cook a piece of wild game poorly. But yeah, spring bears, man, they're tough to make much of anything good out of. For me, a lot of people like it. Like, my buddy Bam, his wife loves spring bear meat. It's her favorite meat. Cody Rich in Montana, his wife absolutely loves spring bear meat. I don't know, but fall bears I enjoy very much. And just a shout out to the world. Bear tags for residents and non-residents in Oregon cost $16.50.
$16.
You can get 2 of them in the fall. The season starts on August 1st. So if you want to do an out-of-state hunt and you want to go hunt in the mountains, whether it's in sheep country or mule deer hunt country or in the canyons or in the deep dark forests, like you can have a really awesome hunting experience, and you can do it for bear in the fall that are eating berries or eating in orchards. It's wonderful meat. It's not that expensive. It's a tag you can get every single year, and you're helping out our elk and deer populations. I encourage you to do that. Shoot those bears and eat them. But me and Eli are going to try out some bear bacon.
Yeah. And actually, if you do shoot one of those Oregon bears, please try my bacon recipe and then just tell me how it turned out. Apparently, I am the worst bear hunter in the world. Well, maybe the worst, but I suck.
So there is one other thing I'm aware of that you're bad at, and evidently that's spearing octopus in Greece.
Oh my God, it is impossible. It is simply impossible. And also, okay, when I lived in Greece, I was like so convinced. Well, you'd see like, a freaking 10-year-old kid will hop off a dock and come up with an octopus with a trident. So I'm like, I got this. I tried for an entire summer. I bet you I logged more hours into trying to kill an octopus with it. The old style trident style spears where you had a big rubber band and you let it flip, and they're impossible. I think that the Greeks speak a different language to them, and they like coax them in with their Zeusisms and whatnot to catching them, because I don't think it's humanly possible.
So the reason that I'm talking about this is my favorite things on the menu at your restaurant is beef short ribs and octopus, and absolutely phenomenal. And the fact that I like octopus surprises me about myself. Like, that's not something that I ever saw coming. The only reason I ever had it in the first place is we were eating there together and you ordered it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's so good. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about that small town that you were in with Eric and just that whole scene. Like, that was amazing.
It's man, if you haven't had time to go to the Greek islands, and not the main ones, but if you there's so many islands out there and they're so accessible. Go get to Kos, get to any of those islands, and then ask for a taxi to a smaller island that a village is on, and just see the culture. Don't spend 5 days there and just watch the fishermen, be able to eat out of a tavern and so on and so forth. The village that I was in was on the island of Kalymnos because it was climbing, and we happened to find this little backside fishing village out in the middle of nowhere, the classic Greek setup, one taverna right at the end of the fishing dock. And It was just unbelievable. So everyone around there is goat farmers, goat herders, cheesemakers, fishermen's, or garlic, and they made a pretty large amount of different spirits and booze throughout the hills there.
Okay.
Sounds like the house that I grew up in. But I think that the best part of this town was the dock that all the fishermen came into. The bar at the end had like one of the best bar tricks I've ever seen ever. And the bar girl at the time, she was 15, the daughter of the owner of the taverna, would take any tourist's watch off of their hand and chuck it as far as they could into the bay and make his daughter go get it.
Wow.
So you're sitting there like, can I see your watch? And grab it and throw it. And his daughter would run out of the kitchen, jump into the and it's like, if you tried your hardest, you wouldn't be able to hold your breath long enough to like get halfway to the bottom of this. And people would just be freaking out, me being one of them. And she'd come swimming up with your watch, be like, I found it. Here you go. Opa, have some ouzo. Break a plate. The best. It's so fun.
And they would tenderize the octopus that they caught on that dock, right?
Yeah, exactly. They bring it up and they beat it. They add salt to it, and it releases all of its toxins. It gets slowly but surely tender, and then they hang it to dry out in the sun, so no refrigeration. And there's two different ways to cook it. Some people cook it at that point directly on the grill, and it's a little bit more chewy, but very, very delicious. And then the other way is to cap it with wine and olive oil and slow simmer it for a few hours and then grill it. Is the most traditional ways to do it. But yeah.
Didn't somebody like break a foot during this deal?
That would be me. Yeah. That was the worst experience ever. Thank you, Eric Moore. I'm sure you'll listen to this, Eric Moore. The last day we were there, he did his apprenticeship with me, but he's a good friend of mine. Last day of our climbing trip in Kalymnos there, we were climbing, doing stupid things like you would when you're young and climbing, and just kind of falling whenever we wanted to. And I took a stupid fall and was falling face first down the cliff, and my foot got caught in the cliff.
Ooh.
And Eric ran and tried to catch me. Long story short, we're up on the side of this mountain, and I knew Eric had to get on an airplane that next morning, and I was supposed to start my cooking job the very next day in the Greek island. And he took me to the hospital. So he drives me to this Greek hospital, and I was in a world of pain, like just screaming, just, this hurts. My foot's swollen so big. Everything sucks. And Eric swings me into this hospital, goes in. He's like, there's nobody in there. Grabs a wheelchair, brings me inside, puts me up on the table, goes walking around. And like, I'm just looking at my foot being like, God, how did I do this? Didn't really I didn't assess the situation around me. And he finds this guy that walks in, classic Greek guy, smoking a cigarette. And at that point, my Greek was still very rusty. And he just looks at me and he's like, climbing? Just said stupid and walks out. And Eric looks around and there's just like bloody catheters and like unclean knives everywhere, and it's just the dirtiest place. And he's like, I just don't think you should let them cut you open inside of this place.
Solid advice.
Solid advice. And he had to take off that day. He left me there. They made me this hilarious cast, and I couldn't get a crutch because they were in Athens and it was a week out. So they gave me a stick. So I had a crutch and a stick and no money, and I had to get out of the hotel I was at. So I convinced a taxi driver, a water taxi driver, to drive me to the backside of the island where I could just camp. Oh, they gave me, of course, a bottle of pain pills, which is new to me. Wasn't really big. So I took a 12-pack of beer, a bottle of pain pills, went to this deserted island and told him to come pick me up. And I think it was 7 or 8 days later, but I had a ton of water. The cure, this is a very Greek cure too. They're like, yeah, make sure you soak your cast in the ocean every day. Make sure that's gonna fix it. And that's what I did. I would just once a day I would swim out as far as I possibly could from the island, and then swim back, and then have a pain pill and drink a beer. Then I lost track of what time it was, like what day, like did the whole, okay, I have this many bottles of water.
Yeah.
And I was like, but this is my 5th day here. No, it's my 4th day here. fifth day here. Oh Lord. And then I was convinced it was one more, and I thought I was out there, and I was plotting my path with a stick and a clutch on how to get back to the island. I don't think I've ever been quite as happy as when that guy turned that corner and I heard his little motor coming. Oh God, relief.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So then did you end up staying there and cooking?
I did. And that was a wake up call for sure. So that, a Swiss kitchen is precision. Like, of course, if you're making 100 gallons of bouillon, they'll measure out the cloves. And we had a huge kitchen brigade, and the kitchen I walked into in Greece was the exact opposite. It was 4 cooks, 300 guests, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we just made food, we if we got lamb, it came in fur on right in the middle of the kitchen, and we cut the fur off and make lamb. It wasn't like baby back or tenderloin. It was like make lamb. If it was octopus or fish, you get a crate of fish and you make fish. And it was so much fun, but it was so unbelievably, they didn't pay me. That didn't help. But it was so fun to hey, I spent these time learning how to cook and butcher, and now this is my first job out of it. And these guys have been doing this forever and really got some chops, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It would be so hot because they didn't have AC in there, that we would take we had to wear fancy European chef coats, that we would dip them in water and put them in the basement deep freezer. And so right around noon, when it was a gazillion degrees, we'd run into the basement and step into a frozen chef's jacket. Make it through the rest of the service.
Dude, that's fun. Next level.
Oh, so fun. Younger times.
If people want to order, can they even order sausage or charcuterie from Olympia Provisions? Is that a difficult process?
No, it's an easy process. Please do olympiaprovisions.com. We have salami subscriptions. We ship out daily. We ship to every state in America.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. Please try the product. I'd be very flattered.
What type of, I don't know, what kind of volume are you doing these days? How many hogs are you going through in order to make all your product?
The hog number, now that is a difficult question for me to answer. This year we're expected to do my first 1.5 million pounds of processing.
Wow.
So divide that by 275.
1.5 million pounds. Incredible.
Yeah, that's it. I know. And again, it's when it's 2009, one-man employee back there scrubbing, and now to see that the people actually bought this molded fermented meat. I get to talk to you about making it. It's pretty freaking awesome. I'm very lucky.
Well, you're extraordinarily hardworking. Your sister's really smart. Yeah, you guys are a powerful team, and you've done an amazing thing, and you've hired really good people. You've hired veterans that help run your shop like they were running a shop, back when they were a troop. And you've done an amazing thing, and the product speaks for itself. It's my very favorite stuff to eat. Encourage folks to check it out. What about the cookbook? Where can they find that?
Amazon, but preferably the same website that you're going to order the salamis off of, for sure. We also operate restaurants here. So if you're ever in Portland for any reason, please let me know.
Yeah.
Ask James to get my number. I can get it to you. We'll spoil you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's Olympia Provisions. You'll find it. And yeah, gosh, how long will one of those salamis keep in a refrigerator?
So that's in theory, they're shelf stable. And so that's kind of a plight for me. They're never going to go bad. You know what I mean? You're not going to get sick. You're not going to get sick from it. But if you leave them outside of a Ziploc or not in a crisper, I don't add any additives in them to stop them from drying. So they're going to continue to dry. The molds on the outside are going to continue to live. So, there's a preconception in America that salami should be a shelf-stable merchandised product out on a counter, kind of like a Slim Jim or a jerky stick. That there's an amazing place for that, and I love those products. But a salami in my world, that's like the way you would handle like a Bloomy Rind cheese or a cheese. It should be kept in refrigeration out of the airflow. long story short, they should be about a month if they're handled well outside of a product. After that, they're just going to start tasting the texture will be a little harder, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but still very good. I mean, I've eaten salamis of yours that have been in my fridge for a year, and yeah, they're a little bit harder to cut, but they're still very, very good. I guess the point that I'm trying to make there is you're buying something special. Like you're buying a piece of art that's edible that you can share with friends and you can tell an interesting story about, and you can dip into the history of meat preservation within our species, and the thousands and thousands of years of doing this. Even before we were cooking with fire, we were figuring out ways to preserve meat. I think that the knife predated fire by like 30,000 years. Like it was really significant amount of time. And same way with this preservation. So you'll find that there's something old and maybe even atavistic about experiencing this meat. But don't feel like, okay, I opened the package, now I've got to eat it all this week. Like you're going to be okay. Like you can kind of spread it out over, a month of events, and then order more because you're probably going to want to.
For sure. And that's a good thing you say. I think if anything that I brought to the American cured meat movement is, we don't do any kind of smoke and mirrors. I've moved it back to I've done it the way we've done it for 1,000 years. I'm not using milk powders or quick cultures or fermenting it. I'm doing it with real smoke, real heat, real fermentation, real molds. And they're hard to find. And there's a million easier and faster ways to make cured meats, but they don't taste like the cured meats that I want to produce. And we'll see. It's not for everybody. It's blue cheeses and molded crazy funky meats with real ingredients. For some people, it's not them. I appreciate that. That's totally fine.
Yeah. Well, you're gentler than I am.
You also have a great palate. You love good food. So
I do. Well, buddy, I appreciate your time. We're getting late into the evening here, and I don't want to take up any more of yours. But again, pleasure. I appreciate you very much, and dead serious about the bear. August,
I gotta get it done.
Early August. Like, I don't see why not. Let's just go do it.
Really? Early August? Do you think that's a possibility?
Heck yeah, that's when the berries are out. Why not?
God, yes, let's do it. Are you kidding me?
No, yes. Not at all.
That's what you're saying.
I don't joke about these things.
It's true. Who am I talking to? Take your words back, Eli. Oh, man, right. That would be amazing. And thanks so much for having me, James. I love this podcast so much. You're doing, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent in my garden loving your guests and enjoying it. It's so fantastic. You're doing an amazing job. Thanks for all you do.
I appreciate it. All right. We'll catch you later.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
I'm working on building a house this year, which is something that I know nothing about. And I love that. It's exciting. Everything is a new challenge, and there's lots of challenges that pop up. The other day, we were laying out rebar and getting ready to pour concrete for the foundation of the shop that's going to be next to the house. And one of the guys that was there that was helping, one of the construction crewmen, I looked over and he had a Stanley thermos sitting on the end of the trailer. I said, "How do you like that thing?" And he goes, "Oh, I love it. I've had it for a decade." It's like, if you find any environment where people are out there working hard with their hands outside, no matter the conditions, you're probably going to see a Stanley product there. It's something that just goes with that blue collar labor, because that's what this product is doing. It is out there working just as hard as you are. It's going to be there as long as you are. It's going to be there after you're done. It's something that I feel passionate about with every piece of gear that I take either into the woods or into the workplace. Like, it's got to be able to outwork me, and I work really hard myself. If you are also a hard worker, and I'm sure that you are, then you could probably appreciate the same type of gear. If you go to stanley1913.com and you use the discount code 6RANCH, that's the number 6 and the word ranch, you can get 25% off just about any of their products. And I encourage you to do that. They're a great supporter of this show and great supporter of this audience. Again, I love you guys, and I just want to pass this discount and the savings on to you. If you want something from Stanley, I encourage you to get it. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at Six Ranch Podcast or me at Six Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the Six Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.